Go. Oh, you're welcome. Great. All right. I am good afternoon. Good afternoon. What day is it? Where is it? It's 1 o'clock. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Danielle Fabrizio. I am the supervisor of Valley's Community Health Department and the coordinator for our Thrive program. And I'm super excited for this afternoon's program called Preventive Pediatrics. Before we get started, just a little bit about Thrive. Thrive is a program from Valley Hospital. Our goal is to support and empower moms and families in our community. And I am thrilled to be able to coordinate it and support you all as best I can. I will put a couple links in our chat here. There's a link to our private Facebook group for moms, and then a link to our free membership program. During today's presentation, if at any time you have questions, please submit them through the Q&A portal. At the end of the program, we will have time to address a few questions. And without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce today's speaker. Dr. Cecilia Godoy is one of Valley's newest pediatricians at the Montvale Valley Medical Group. She did her residency at St. Barnabas Hospital, Department of Pediatrics in the Bronx. She is board certified through the American Board of Pediatrics. Thank you so much for hanging out with us this afternoon. Take it away.
Hi, thank you, and hello to everyone. I'm very excited to be here. So yes, there are three, actually, I go back again. There are three important areas that I want to address. I want to address one of them. So in preventive medicines, we want the parents to address these areas. So one is, of course, consistent and timely prenatal care. The second is routine well visits and timely vaccinations. And the third is following important safety guidelines and keep our young ones safe. So my presentation today is going to focus on one of these. So the safety guidelines to keep your child free from accidents and injuries. So today's talk, we're going to talk about, mostly of the talk is going to be about the updated infant sleep guidelines. We're going to talk a little bit about car seat recommendations, pool and water precautions, bicycle injury, fall injuries, medication safety, and poisoning. So let's get started. So the American Academy of Pediatrics released new updated infant sleep guidelines for reducing infant deaths in 2022. And the background is that, about 3,500 infants in the United States die each year of sleep-related causes. And that includes SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome, ill-defined deaths, accidental suffocation, and strangulation in bed. So just for the definitions, there's this term of sudden unexpected infant death, which is SUID. And that can be explained or unexplained. And SIDS, which is the most common term that we speak about, sudden infant death syndrome, is one of these unexplained events. So it's unexplained sudden death in infancy. And unfortunately, there are increasing racial and ethnic disparities. There is increased infant death rates in those identified as non-Hispanic Black. There's also twice as high risk of living in poverty in this group. So that by itself is a known risk factor for infant death. So we talk about the triple risk model that proposes the increased risk of SIDS, so sudden infant death. So there is an intrinsic vulnerability, so something within the baby itself. It could be impaired arousal, something with the cardiorespiratory system or the autonomic response. And then an external event, so something from the outside, for example, an unsafe sleep environment. And that it happens during a critical developmental period. So these studies are done during the first year of the infant's life. So the recommendations are only for this period of time. So what are the recommendations? So the highest level of recommendation is that the baby should be back to sleep. For some parents, this doesn't feel like a natural recommendation because before we were told they should sleep face down. So some might be nervous that what happens if the baby vomits or they spit up or they have mucus and they cannot clear it when they're laying on their back. But what you can see here on the pictures is that the tube to the lungs and the tube to the stomach. So the tube to the lungs is above the tube to the stomach. So with gravity, if a baby vomits and they're on their back, it's going to go down into the stomach. Rather, if the baby is on the stomach, this tube is now closer, further down. So it's a higher risk for aspiration and choking when the baby is on the tummy. So back to sleep is the recommendation. Another strong recommendation is to sleep on a firm, non-inclined sleep surface. So it should be less than 10 degrees. The firm mattress means that some memory foams might make an indentation, so it's not recommended. No water mattresses, for example. And they should be meeting the Consumer Product Safety Commission standards for sleep surface. Avoid soft beddings and like blankets, toys, pillows in the bed. We want to avoid overheating, so we don't want to put head coverings on the babies when they're indoors at home. They've seen that human breast milk is associated with a decreased risk of SIDS. So the more exclusively breastfed, the higher risk reducing effect. So the more you're breastfeeding, desto better. And pacifiers also seem to have a risk reducing effect. We're not 100% sure in what way this is working. We think it might be that the baby doesn't get into that full deep sleep, that the suckling of the pacifier has some gives the baby an increased arousal. So as long as breastfeeding is established, that you have a good latch, that you're breastfeeding well, pacifiers are actually recommended. And another thing is just to know that if the baby drops the pacifier or it falls out of the mouth at night, you don't have to go and put it back in. It still has a risk reducing effect to start off with the pacifier. And then the last one on this slide is room sharing without bed sharing. So the current recommendations are they prefer the infant to sleep in the parent's room up until the first birthday, so the first year of life, but at least the first 6 months. And I want to talk a little bit more about bed sharing. And we understand that there are many cultural and personal beliefs about the benefits of bed sharing, but due to these risks, the Academy of Pediatrics cannot recommend it. So there's a 10 times risk just to share a bed with anyone that has impaired arousals due to drugs or a current smoker, or even if you're smoking during pregnancy. The soft surface by itself also gives 10 times higher risk of SIDS. And there's a 5 to 10 times risk if the baby is a young baby. So any healthy baby younger than 4 months of age is at higher risk of SIDS. And bed sharing with anyone that is not their parent. So any siblings or grandparents is a higher risk. There's 2 to 5 times risk of sudden infant death in preterm or low birth weight infants, even if they're otherwise healthy, and with soft beddings and pillows and blankets. And you can see here the pictures sort of illustrates what can happen. And with the bed sharing, usually the scary ones is if you roll over at night and you don't notice that the baby is sort of entrapped under you or under an arm or something. there's 22 to 67 times increased risk of infant death if sleeping on couches and armchairs. So it's technically less hazardous if a parent falls asleep while feeding in the adult bed compared to doing it on a sofa or an armchair. So some further recommendations, some of them might seem pretty obvious, to avoid any exposure to nicotine, alcohol, marijuana, opiates, or other drugs. But routine prenatal care, there's actually substantial epidemiologic evidence linking a lower risk of SIDS for infants where there have been regular prenatal care. However, limited prenatal care often results from social determinants of health, and that's also associated with an increased risk of SIDS. One thing that might be surprising is it's not recommended to have home cardiorespiratory monitoring devices. These are not approved for this purpose. And the worry is that it might cause a sense of security that we're not checking our infants like we otherwise would be doing. And supervised awake tummy time, we definitely recommend tummy time for our babies. And this is to, you know, support and promote neck strength, and it also prevents to get a flat head. Other recommendations are to, again, follow the Consumer Product Safety Commission safety standards. So avoid commercial devices that are inconsistent with safe sleep recommendations. And one thing to know is that swaddling is not recommended as a strategy to reduce SIDS. So it's not proven to reduce SIDS. And swaddling should not be done after they're starting to roll over or beyond 2 months of age. So the changes compared to the 2016 guidelines are now they're defined the non-inclined surface to less than 10 degrees. So it needs to be a flat surface. The no hats on the head beyond the NICU time or a few hours of life, well, indoors, of course. So when it's cold out, please put hats on your babies. And the no cardiorespiratory monitors at home. And the tummy time, it's now defined as 15 to 30 minutes daily by 7 weeks of age. So they put more of a time recommendation for that. And let's switch. So just a few more thoughts about sleep guidelines. So back to sleep and no co-sleeping is a strong recommendation. We're not recommending cardiorespiratory monitors at home. To do tummy times when the babies are awake and observe it. There's no evidence that swaddling decreases the risk of SIDS, and layered clothing, and so no blankets or so forth in the cribs. You can have wearable blankets, but weighted blankets are not recommended. And another thing is when the babies are old enough that they can roll over from both sides, so back to front and front to back, the recommendation is to put them down on their back, but if they overnight roll over, you don't have to, you let them be where they are. You don't have to keep putting them back on their back. So that was it for the sleep guidelines. I want to talk a little bit about car seat recommendations. So the American Academy of Pediatrics issued a policy statement of child passenger safety in November of 2018. And it provides evidence-based recommendations for best practices of choice of child restraint systems. So for the background, for that, current estimates of child restraint effectiveness indicate that child safety seats are reducing the risk of injury by 71 to 82% and reduces the risk of death by 28% when compared to children similar ages in seatbelts. booster seats reduce the risk of non-fatal injury among 4 to 8-year-olds by 45% compared to seat belts alone. So the CDC has created a great visual tool and a great demonstration based on the American Academy of Pediatrics recommendations for differed by ages and what type of car seat and the typical ages that they're recommended. So I'll go through these a little bit one by one. So the youngest babies, infants and young children, they should be rear faced in the back seat of the car, and they should stay there until they outgrow by height and weight of the car's manufacturer, the car seats manufacturer. This is usually by age 2 to 4 years old that they stay rear faced. One thing to know about these is, of course, that the car seat, they should have this harness. The latch should be over the chest of the infant. It should be snug. Maybe you should be able to fit 2 fingers under the latch, and the baby shouldn't be able to move around a lot. So if it's a small infant, you see this picture here, you might have to prop with some blankets so that the baby stays in place, but it should be a snug and correct fit. One thing about sleep here, so infants can sleep in the car seat while you're out driving, but it's not a safe sleep condition otherwise. So as soon as you get home or you arrive wherever you're going, they should be transferred to a safe sleeping condition. So when they outgrow the rear-faced infant seats, they should sit in the face front one that has the harness, which is important. And usually this is at least until age 5. Again, it needs to be snug over the chest, and you have to pull that up so it's actually on the chest. And here again, different seats are going to have different manufacturer recommendations. So until they outgrow by height and weight. And then you get even older. So if a child is using a booster seat, the booster seats, you know that it's correctly fastened when the lap belt is across the thighs and not across the stomach. And the shoulder belt is across the center of the shoulder and chest and not the neck or face or off the shoulder. And this is also when you can transfer to just a regular seat belt. When you see that the child is okay to sit without any booster seat and they still have the lap belt and the shoulder belt across the correct places. And all children younger than 13 years of age should ride in the back seat. They should not be in the front seats of the car. So here also a few final words. So just to think of the car seat should be used for every ride. It doesn't matter how short the trip is. And they always confirm that the seatbelts are properly fitted and strapped if it's only a seatbelt. If you're in an accident, always discard the car seat, even if you don't see a visible injury. They should be switched out and follow the manufacturer's recommendations. And this CDC chart that I showed you in the beginning is, you can find it on the internet, and I have the link in the end also. But it's very useful to follow. And one thing to just think about is that, you know, cars are so different these days that a child might not need a booster seat in one car, but they might need it in another one. So make sure you have the proper recommendations for every ride. Okay, so let's go here. So pool and water safety. So drowning is the leading cause of death in children age 1 to 4 years old. An average of 4,000 unintentional drowning deaths occurred each year from 2011 and 2020. An average of 8,000 estimated emergency department visits due to non-fatal drownings occurred during these years. And drowning injuries can cause brain damage and other serious outcome, including long-term disability. So what are the risk factors for drowning? Well, some obvious ones are that if you're not able to swim, but also missing or ineffective fences around water, lack of close supervision, the type of water source, and lack of safety equipment. The US Coast Guard reported 658 boating-related deaths in 2021. 81% died by drowning, and 83% of these were not wearing life jackets. So, for example, life jackets is a crucial thing for so personal floating devices like life jackets, they should be approved by the US Coast Guard, and also it's important that they are properly fitted, so not too small or not too big. Swimming lessons, but just of note that swimming lessons has not shown to reduce the risk of drowning in children less than 4 years old. And always, like, never leave a child unattended around water. Supervision is key for this, and teach children basic water safety. And another thing is to have safety equipment around and in the water, like life rings and floats that they can reach for if they fall in the water. When it comes to missing or ineffective fences, the US Consumer Product Safety Commission created this guideline for a residential pool that is very helpful, and they have strict recommendations. A four-sided isolation fence which separates the pool area from the house and yard reduces the child's risk of drowning by 83% compared to three-sided property line fencing, which encloses the entire yard but does not separate the pool from the house. This guideline has strong recommendations of how high the fence should be, the gaps, how wide they should be, what type of self-closing and self-latching of the gates. And for example, if you do have a house as one of the sides of the fencing, that you should have an alarm system. If anyone would open the doors to the outside, that there should be an alarm. And also there's recommendation about pools and spa covers that should be in use if you're not using the pool. So the lack of close supervision and the location, like I said, it has is a strong risk factor. So among infants under 1 year old, 2/3 of all drownings occur in bathtubs. Most drownings happens in home swimming pools among children ages 1 to 4. And just a note about these portable pools that might not have like high water levels, but just a few inches of water can be enough for a small baby to drown. So definitely supervision is key at all times, and also the bathtubs at home, like never leave them for anything unsupervised. With increased age and teenagers, then more natural waters are more of a risk factor and more risky behavior, and sometimes intoxication and other risks at that age. So to finish up the pool and water safety, just to think about that if even a few inches of water is a drowning risk, it takes a few seconds to go under the water. And search water sources first if a child is missing, because time is crucial here, and look there first. And if you have pools and spas nearby, make sure you have proper prevention strategies. So even if you don't have a pool but your neighbor has, make sure and see what they that they're following guidelines and that you know that your child cannot just wander over and fall into the water. And then this last few ones a little bit shorter. So bicycle injury, nearly 1,000 bicyclists died over 130,000 are injured in crashes that occur on roads in the United States every year. The highest risks are at ages 5 to 14 years of age. Bicycle helmets reduce the risk for head, brain, and severe brain injuries at all ages. So even us adults should wear helmets. And they should meet standards of United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, like the others also. I just wanted to talk a few things about the proper fitting of a helmet. They should rest just above the eyebrows and not slide around on the head. The strap should make a Y around the ear of the child, and if the child opens their mouth, it should pull the helmet down. So there should be a snug latch around the chin of the child. And the same thing goes here. If you're in a crash and you fall and it hits the helmet, then you should discard the helmet right away. If you think just about the mounted carriers. Mounted carriers are on the bicycles. They're not recommended for anyone younger than 1 year of age and not older than 4 years of age. And they should have the high back support and also the 5-latch harness and lap belt. And the same thing, bicycle trailers are actually safer than the bicycle mounted carriers. But if you are in a bicycle trailer, you should also wear a helmet riding the trailer. And then just a few words about fall injuries and common prevention strategies. So unintentional falls are a leading cause of non-fatal injury in children in the United States. One fall risk is open windows, just to make sure they have window guards or stops that can be used to prevent falls. Walkers are not really recommended, and especially because there's a high risk of falling downstairs and head injury and injuries of infants in those. As soon as the infant can pull to stand, make sure to lower the mattress in the crib so that it prevents falls out of the crib. And shopping carts to make sure if you have a child in the store to put on the seatbelt and don't walk away, like observe them, because there's a lot of head injuries from shopping carts. So poisoning, when it comes to poisoning, it's a predictable and preventable event. There's a recent article in Pediatrics where Gao et al. Documented the characteristics of fatal poisoning among infants and young children in the United States between the years of 2005 and 2018. All of these children were less than 5 years old. And there was 731 poison-related fatalities, and 40% of them were less than 1 year old, and most of them occurred in the child's home. And what I wanted to show you about this was that apart from the disturbing high number of children dying from opioid overdose, there was a significant number of children dying from common over-the-counter medications. The number there that I circled in red. And these are common medications that we use for pain, colds, allergies, and most of us are going to have some of these medications at least in our house at some point. So just to think of that. So what can we do to prevent poisonings? So medications specifically and contraceptives should be stored out of sight and out of reach, preferably in a locked cabinet box or closet. When we have detergents or oven cleaners, for example, maybe more in the kitchen, to try to store them on the higher shelves and store safer items in the lower cabinets and drawers. and to install child guard latches on cabinet doors and drawers that contain dangerous items. And avoid storage of chemicals in the refrigerators, because a child might mistake it for something, for a drink or a juice or something. And don't use insecticides, traps, or baits in locations where the child have access to it. Things that maybe we have more in our bedrooms are like perfumes, colognes, cosmetics, and hair products that can also be toxic. So try to keep them out of sight and out of reach on upper shelves or in locked containers too. We might not think about toxic plants that some children are going to try to ingest. So also keep them out of reach, and maybe more obvious things like tobacco products or lighters or matches and alcohol should be stored away and not in reach of the child. A few things that maybe we have more in our basements or in our garage, like cleaning supplies or paint, solvents, again, insecticides. And just to not forget about those, and also store them away and locked, and keep them in the original container so it's not mistaken for something else. And we all should have carbon monoxide detectors in our homes in working conditions. So what do you do if there is a possible ingestion of medication or liquid found in the home? So the first thing that I recommend you to do is to call poison control. They are the ones that we often call even from the hospital if you come into the hospital, and they can give you further assistance. So the number is 1-800-222-1222. They're very well trained of many of these ingestions and can give you the first recommendations of what to do and what not to do when something happens. For example, some toxic ingestions will, for example, worsen the damage on the child if you make them vomit or so forth. So they can give you the recommendations, and if you have to go to the hospital and so forth. So I want you all to try to save this number on your phone. You should always have it. Poison control, 1-800-222-1222. And if this is the only thing that you feel like you take home from this lecture, I think that's one achievement, and that's good enough. And then lastly, and then I'm almost done here, a few words about button batteries. Something so small as something that you know, a child can easily swallow, that's so dangerous. A button battery can burn through a child's throat or esophagus, the tube to the stomach, in as little as 2 hours if swallowed, and can lead to sepsis and death. So it's not something that if you swallow a coin, maybe we can follow you and x-rays and make sure you're passing it. That is not what's recommended with a button battery, and this is a medical emergency. So if you have any suspicion, even if you're not fully sure, if you see that there's a battery missing, or you know there was a button battery, now you can't find it, or whatever the reason is, and the child has symptoms of choking or crying or noisy breathing, even if they have no symptoms, but there's a battery missing, I would seek medical care, and I would seek further evaluation. And also, just, this is a good picture because button batteries are actually in a lot of things that maybe we don't think of, like musical greeting cards, remote controls, toys, you know, the hearing aids and all are maybe a more common thing to think about, or some watches, but we even have it in digital thermometers. So make sure they're stored away from your child. Don't let your child play with batteries. If batteries are in a compartment where it's not screwed up, like securely screwed, then I would tape over the compartment to make sure that there is no accidental ingestion. And that was all I had to say for now. And yeah, are there any questions? Thank you.
Thank you so much. We do have a few questions that came in. How do you know when it's safe to move a child to a booster seat?
So the booster seat from the face front seat, I think is what you mean. It's basically based on the height and weight and the manufacturer. So it's more about, of course, if you feel like your child is smaller and they can fit, it is maybe you feel like your child is too young, and there might be another brand or another type of car seat that you like a face front that you feel he could or she could use. But otherwise, it's based on the height and weight, so that they should outgrow them basically.
Should booster seats be anchored in addition to the lap belt?
So they should, a lot of them are not. They don't have the latch system like the face front and the face back, the rear faced car seat. So a lot of them are not going to be, but they need to have both the shoulder and the lap belt. They cannot just have a lap belt.
Great. You mentioned pacifiers in reducing SIDS. Are pacifiers now recommended for newborns through toddlers or not toddlers?
So yes, exactly. And this is a good question. So if, for example, breastfeeding, if you're planning to breastfeed, they do want you to first establish breastfeeding so that you are not intervening with the latch and so forth with the pacifier. But after that, it is recommended to use a pacifier. These recommendations, again, they go up to the first year of life. So at 4 year, as soon as you pass that, you don't really have to use a pacifier. But yes, it's actually seeming to be beneficial.
Great. Thank you so much. And that seems like that is all the questions we have for today. So at this time, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. I would also like to ask everybody to take a few moments to fill out the evaluation that you received in the original email. When you signed up for this program, we sent you an email confirming your registration. There was a Zoom link, and then underneath it was an evaluation link. We'd love to hear from you and get your feedback and your ideas for future programs even. Thank you so much for joining us today, everybody out there. And Dr. Godoy, thank you so much for all of that important information. Have a great day.
Thank you.